We're here to talk about the current supply chain situation and how we got into this mess that we're currently living through, and wanted to get your thoughts on what's going on with supply chains today.
It's good to be here. So what's going on with supply chains today is really the culmination of 30 years of activity. This didn't happen overnight. And we'll talk about this later, but we're not going to get out of this overnight also. But the basic issue here is a deeply integrated global supply chain. What's going on today is we have real shortages, port congestion, difficulty getting workers because what has happened since COVID is volumes have really risen. The amount of imports have really risen. To make things a little worse, even though imports have risen and the demand of the US customers gone up, there's actually been problems globally, especially in China, where there's been COVID shutdowns, as we all know. So the result is a real supply-demand imbalance, not only on the production side overseas, but on the processing side at ports and inland transport, because there's simply a lack of US workers. That's a whole different issue as to why there's a lack of US workers, but a lot related to stimulus and other things. But the result is a complete supply-demand mismatch across the supply chain.
Why were supply chains built in such a way anyway, where they're extremely extended over into Asia with such little resilience against those types of issues?
It's very, very simple. It's you can bring it up in one word. It's called profit. But there's a lot of complexity behind that. Companies globally were happy to migrate operations to Asia. Initially it was Japan. A lot of outsourcing went on Japan. We may remember in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. But China essentially supplanted Japan as the factory of the world because there was massive government intervention in China. They were very keen to create jobs. And a huge labor force, which was way less expensive. So profits drove this movement over there. But there's many other ways to look at this also. Obviously, people wanted lower cost for profits. There was a desire to just get things done simply. There's, keep it simple, stupid. And people just said, okay, OEMs just said, let's just outsource everything and we'll get a finished good magically popping off a boat or an airplane. I should definitely mention that this came with, it was enabled by great networks, computer systems, and by containerization. So a lot of factors conspired to make this profit motive possible, and companies just outsourced everything they could. I should add that there was tremendous government acquiescence and even encouragement. The US was very happy with the results in Japan post-World War II. Japan basically became part of the G7 and completely integrated into the global economy. The Western and the Western value system, rules-based. The conflict that was there with Japan was replaced with long-term prosperity. And I think there was a real expectation that exactly the same thing would happen with China. The key part is, I should mention this was based on very limited knowledge. It was based on the expectation that there would be a level playing field. It was based on the expectation that there would be no subsidies. It was based on the expectation that IP would not be stolen. It was based on the expectation that transportation costs would stay flat.
And honestly, based on an assumption that there would be no unexpected interruptions in supply.
Yes, and that brings up probably the biggest vulnerability is the interruptions in supply caused by COVID, the huge increase in demand also caused by people being at home. The combination of these two co-conspired to create significant demand. Now you layer onto that what happened in Ukraine, you layer on that geopolitics, and you realize that we've got a very significant problem on our hand. The governmental acquiescence or encouragement, active encouragement that happened beginning with the time that Nixon's visit to China and Kissinger's effort to open up China, So the government has completely changed. Transportation costs have completely changed thanks to oil shock 3, precipitated by the war in Ukraine, and just a variety of other factors, the biggest of which is being the supply shock and the demand, the significant demand uptick and the supply shock.
Some people have said it's just important to have sort of redundant supply chains, a parallel supply chain to, say, Vietnam or to other places in Southeast Asia where you might be able to have your items made instead of in China, because China shut down. It would be smart to just do the same thing only in multiple places. Why is that not going to potentially yield the same issue down the road?
It very well could. So I think this requires a whole rethinking of the supply chain, and I'm sure we'll talk on that in a future session. But it requires a whole rethinking of the supply chain architecture at the company level, but also at the national level. So this is really a discussion that has got to be executed by OEMs and by companies, but there's got to be some incentives and some structure that everybody's got to pursue with, and everyone's got to proceed with, rather. And that's, of course, part of the discussion that we're having here.